Statistically, Winston is the worst tank in the game, and he actually has been for quite a while. But should that really be the case? Because if you think about it, in this double barrier meta, which tank can do damage through the barriers? Well, it's Winston. So this here is a gameplay clip I've got, and you'll notice that I don't actually have a rank on my profile here, because this is literally, legitimately, the only time that I've actually had to play Winston. Every other time I'm moaned at by my team to play Orisa or to play Sigma, or if there's a Zarya, you've got to play Reinhardt. You're not going to play the Winston because you're going to leave your team exposed because the enemy team have probably got a Sigma and then another barrier, and it's just going to be a nightmare. And it's really sad to me because on paper Winston should be really good in this meta because you've got Doomfist as DPS, you've got Winston as the tank. These two can dive. You can absolutely dive with those two heroes, and Lucio is also very much in the meta as a support. He can speed the rest of your team in, and well, Moira is just Moira and she can't be dived anyway, so if the enemy team had dive, whatever, but we'll get onto that later on in the video. But the fact remains, I'm a little bit perplexed why Winston isn't actually that strong right now, and it makes me really sad because watching this footage back, I feel super happy to actually play Winston. He's so dynamic as a tank, he's so much fun, but instead I'm just sort of stuck in Sigma jail and Orisa jail. That's not to say I don't like playing Sigma, I do enjoy playing Sigma, and maybe that's just a result of, well, Sigma's the new hero, so he's got a fancy new kit. Orisa, not the biggest fan of playing Orisa, I'm not going to lie. So let's take a look at some statistics before we really drill down and try and work out what the problem is with Winston and how we can fix this. So this is the pick rates of the tanks. This is taken from Overbuff, and this is in competitive. And you'll notice there is a bit of an issue. Sigma 24% pick rate. I mean, that goes without saying because Sigma is the latest tank. People were, they're just going to pick him up and play him. Thing is with Sigma, he's really, really, really damn good. Sigma's got the best barrier because it's highly mobile. He can just throw it wherever he likes. He's also got a load of utility. He's got his suck, so he can eat projectiles. He can eat ultimates like Hanzo's, Zarya's ultimate, for example. He's just really good. His ultimate is mega good as well. His primary attack's really good. Sigma, everything he does is really, really good. So you'd be kind of stupid not to take the Sigma. And of course, in a double barrier meta, yeah. Then we get Zarya, then we get Orisa, fairly close in pick rate. I thought Orisa might have been over the Zarya, but the thing what's going on here with the Zarya, Orisa, and Reinhardt is if you've got Zarya on your team, then if you're the tank player, you really need to play Reinhardt because he's the only tank that Zarya really synergizes with in this meta. You could argue that, yeah, well, I could play Hammond or Winston or D.Va because Zarya can bubble me when I dive in. Problem is, your team have got no protection and they'll all die because the enemy team will have double barrier. That's the problem. So then we look at Roadhog. Yeah, it's not Hog's meta at all. Hog was meta with Orisa before Sigma came out. And then everyone realized Sigma was just, well, better because Hog's got the very dubious slot of being a tank that actually doesn't really absorb damage. He's sort of like Wrecking Ball in a way, like he just sort of is there, although Wrecking Ball is disruptive, he can knock you out of the way. Hog, yeah, he just kind of punishes you for being in a bad position, and historically, can I even say this? He's kind of more of like the DPS tank pick, although I suppose that's Zarya as well, but remember, Zarya does have the bubbles. Anyway, let's move on from Hog. Hog's not in a great place. Wrecking Ball, yeah, not great, but Wrecking Ball, D.Va, and Winston are not great because they're dive tanks, and dive isn't the thing because of the way the meta's gone, and I will explain that in this video, and also because of recent buffs and nerfs. And then at the bottom we get Winston with a 4.1% pick rate and the lowest win rate of all the tanks, which is not ideal. So if we go forward and we take a look at the pick rate over the last couple of months, now this tells a story. This tells a very sad story for Winston. He's been murdered by the meta constantly. So he was no good in GOATs because, well, GOATs did not really include a Winston. You could take a Winston in some comps, but it wasn't ideal. And then we go forward to this meta and we see Winston with the most, well, literally the lowest pick rate he's ever had. Now, you could argue that, okay, Winston's had years of dive and being meta, so he's not meta now. Is that okay? Thing is, guys, I'm not sure if that actually is okay, because do we really want a game where every other meta just completely removes literally almost all the hero cast and we're forced to play just a bunch of optimal heroes? Because if we don't, then we're throwing, and that to me is really bloody annoying. So let's take a look at what's happened to Winston. What is going on? Well, we've got the 2-2-2 meta. This hasn't been great to our poor scientist Ape because, well, yeah, we had a certain number of changes here. Now, what's happened is barrier meta became very prevalent. Sigma came out at the same time of 2-2-2, which honestly, looking back at that, is such a horrific decision by Blizzard because you're giving yourself a brand new way to play the game, throwing in a new hero, and then throwing in a couple of buffs and nerfs, and obviously the rework to Brigitte, for example, and then you're just sort of like, well, I wonder what will happen. what will happen? Well, what will happen is the game will go into disarray because it's not balanced. And I honestly think Blizzard really need to start pumping out some changes. And I'm very surprised that we haven't had a PTR patch just yet that's addressed some of these problems. You know, like Winston just gets deleted. Doomfist really good. Reaper really good. May really good. Maybe something to do with barriers. Maybe we're going to get a hero in the future which can disable barriers that we don't know about, but Blizzard does. That's why they're not changing the stuff. We just don't know. But I hate being in this situation where we have no idea what's going on. Anyway, these are the facts about Winston. He's got the worst barrier of any barrier tank when it's used in a straight up barrier fight, because it's got the least HP. It will just get destroyed. And then Winston can't protect his team. Winston's barrier is really good when it's used for what it's used for, and that is getting into the back line. You know, you imagine if you jump onto an Ana, you drop the barrier onto her. She can't heal through the barrier, she's screwed. But I've got news for you guys, Ana's not really meta, so if it's against Moira or Baptiste or Lucio, well, they don't care. They're either going to boop you out the way, they're just going to walk out of it, they're going to jump out of it, they're going to use their abilities around it. They just don't really care, and that's going to be a problem for you as Winston, because you're not doing your job, and the rest of your team are probably going to get destroyed. And then they moan and say, hey, why are you not playing Orisa? Why are you not playing Sigma? And then you as a Winston player go and cry in a corner. So that's not great. But it's not only just that. Winston really, really suffers from the fact May, Reaper, and Doomfist are very much the best DPS picks right now, and they are absolutely hard counters to Winston. Reaper has been consecutively buffed over the last couple of months to make him stronger, and this just means he's much better at killing tanks. Now, he was buffed to shut down Goats, but Goats is no longer a thing. We're in 2-2-2, so there is an argument that Reaper should actually be looked at again, and they should do something to reduce his effectiveness, potentially reduce the amount of health he gets back from lifesteal. I think his damage is fine because he is designed to be the tank buster at close range, but maybe take a look at some of his other kit, because remember, these changes were made before we had 2-2-2, and now we've got 2-2-2. Some of them are kind of a bit dodgy. Doomfist, why is he so strong right now? Well, Doomfist is one of the only DPS that can do all of his damage. In fact, I think he is the only DPS that does all of his damage. Well, okay, his primary fire doesn't go through barriers, but everything else, when he's coming at you, well, let's just say his main spike damage, obviously his fist, when he comes in and punches you, ignores barriers. So he can punch through barriers, punch it into walls, and you can argue that because you've got barriers everywhere and it's very visually disruptive, you don't actually know where Doomfist is coming from. And I bet you guys have been there. I've been there. I've slammed my desk. I'm like, oh my god, what the hell? Doomfist has just killed me again. It's like, what? How has he killed me? It's because he's come flying through with his fist and just punched me, and I didn't see him coming because there's a billion graphical effects in my face and a Symmetra barrier, right? It's like, what the hell? Oh, and Symmetra's the other DPS I haven't even spoke about. She's actually pretty good against Winston, because Winston's a big chonker of a lad, and he's quite easy to hit and charge up off, and yeah, unlucky Winston. So Doomfist is really strong because of double barrier meta, and May is really strong because she's strong against double barrier meta, and in a way gives you another barrier, but she's strong because she can shut down the tank. She's like kind of like a tank herself as well, and she's got an extremely good ultimate which can just destroy the enemy team, especially if you start seeing Bastion, which again is the other DPS we haven't really spoke about, but we are seeing more of, where he would just destroy a Winston. Like, what can Winston do to a Bastion? He's just going to get deleted. So Winston's got a massive load of problems here that are all stacking up against him, and it's simply because 2-2-2 came out with a lot of changes that were not really intended for 2-2-2, that were made for 3-3 and the Goats comp, but have all countered Winston. And because we don't have dive anymore, Winston's got a problem. I did kind of touch on it a little bit earlier on in the video, but also Winston can't do his job. Even if you've got Winston on your team, he can't dive anybody, because if the enemy team have got Baptiste and Moira, who's he going to dive there? He needs to be diving Zen, he needs to be diving Ana, and they're not meta anymore. You can play them every now and again, but they're not there on the field. So Winston doesn't get to do what he needs to do, and this comes back to the whole problem of the way Overwatch is balanced, where it has these really weird, like, I mean, this has really struck me as something I don't think I've covered a lot on the channel, and I really should be, where I look at the meta and I'm like, I've always been of the mindset of, yeah, you know what we should do is look at the meta, use it to our advantage, and yeah, we should play along with it. There must be reasons for it. Let's work out why. Was it played at the pro level? This is why it's strong. And you know, the meta is there because it is generally the best way to play the game for the most value, let's say. Not the best way to play the game. I don't want people going, Sly, what are you talking about? The meta's terrible, because it kind of is really terrible. But it's the most optimal way to win matches, I suppose. That's the way to look at it. it has such wild swings, and you just go from heroes that were playable to suddenly not being playable. And if I was a player that played one hero and that was my main, and I think I've used Soldier as this example in the past, where if I was playing Soldier and then suddenly Soldier just completely radically changed, or something happened to him which made him completely useless, I would be like, why am I playing this game anymore? That is just mental design to me. The thing is, though, because of my YouTube channel and because of the way I played Overwatch originally, and I was very much into the whole you've got to flex to win, I play every role, so I don't feel as connected to a hero as a lot of you guys do out there. So if you played Mercy and then Mercy gets radically changed, you're like, what the hell is this? You've just completely destroyed my hero. I am not immune to that, but I think the effects of that don't hit me as much. And the more I've focused on that, and the more I've realized that, I start thinking, well, actually, this is really, really dodgy design. So just to cap this video off, Winston's problem is you've got to look at the value he brings to the table. You've got to look at what the current meta heroes do to Winston, and literally every single one destroys Winston. Even though on paper Winston should be good against double barrier, he doesn't offer enough to protect his team while he's attacking through barriers, and also the enemy DPS are extremely good against Winston if they're playing meta DPS, which they probably are playing meta DPS, and that's a massive, massive shame. Of course, Winston's other issue is he has no synergy with any of the meta tanks, so Winston and Orisa is not particularly great. Winston and Sigma is not particularly great. Just because they're tanks, they're like apples and oranges. You can't really compare them. You've got dive tanks with tanks that are not dive tanks, so it doesn't really work. You could argue that, okay, maybe Sigma would work a little bit with Winston. Sigma can throw his barrier forward and such, but it's not ideal. There would be better heroes to pick in those roles. So I guess the question is, guys, to end this video, what's the future looking like for our beloved ape scientist? I don't think it's great unless something really drastic happens and a major balance patch comes out. But again, that's just sort of swinging it back in the other direction. Suddenly all the meta tanks now are no longer meta and maybe Winston becomes meta. That's just going to be really frustrating. Or maybe there's a new hero which is going to come out which potentially disables gadgets and objects and barriers, so then Winston can maybe do what he needs to do. I don't know. Guys, I've been Stylosa, this is Unit Lost. Let me know what you think about this video in the comments below. I've wanted to talk about Winston for a while because he's one of my favorite tanks to play, but I just don't get to play him, and it's really frustrating. All right, guys, I'll catch you lot on the next one. Toodaloo.